Hello, bonjour, hola, guten tag, ciao, namaste, shalom. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow fantasy geeks, or sweaties as I like to say now. Actually, I've just nicked that term from Collider Video, but what the hey, I think it sounds good. It has taken me absolutely ages to get this video out, and now that I have a few subscribers, I do want to take this channel a bit more seriously and upload regularly. It's just the past few months have been, well, to put it bluntly, hell. I've had a lot of personal issues, family issues to take care of, and YouTube, unfortunately, has had to take a bit of a back seat for a while. Following those issues, my computer broke, then my microphone sounded like I was basically trying to narrate the video in the middle of a hurricane, so there's been a lot of technical issues to take care of.
Still, it's free, so you can't be too mad at me. I must mention, however, that in an earlier video I had a little competition where the first person to answer the question, which Tzeentch champion has his own novel dedicated to him, would get a shout out. The answer was Egrim van Horseman, and the winner was Andrew Fulton. So hopefully you are still watching so you can check out the shout out. I think you'll like it, trust me. Incredibly close, literally seconds later, a fellow called JHC also replied with the correct answer. So there's a little shout out for you in there too.
But enough about all that. Today we are going to be talking about magic in the Warhammer world. That's right, it is a big one. That's what she said. So sit down, get comfy, and let's start from the very beginning. It was the Old Ones that were the first beings to exist in Warhammer lore that were capable of doing things that could possibly be called magic. So let's begin with them. The Old Ones are the mystical space-travelling creatures that adapted the world to how we know it. Now, in a fantasy world that contains within it magic, it is no stretch to believe that a form of magic was used in order to accomplish this. Now, the Old Ones are gone, kaput. So anything that we say about their abilities is pure speculation. Along with that, the typical magic that we see in Warhammer has its source in chaos, which evolved separately from the Old Ones' work, and was actually responsible for their death. So the magic of the Old Ones must have been a different kind of magic to the normal kind, its own thing, if you will. We do, however, have a big clue to understanding the magic that the Old Ones used to create and reshape the world, and create the races that we know and love. That clue is the Slann. The Slann are the first beings that the Old Ones created to populate the world, to mould it to their vision. That goes for most of the Slann. However, looking into the earliest histories of the Warhammer lore, it turns out that the first generation of Slann actually travelled with the Old Ones in their spacecrafts, and so were around before the coming of chaos. Their magical abilities therefore predate our common conception of Warhammer magic and how it works through chaos. So let's move into the realm of speculation for a moment here, and making an educated guess, we can look at the first-hand accounts of the Old Ones contained within the Slann's religion, and look at the magical abilities of the Slann themselves to get a good general idea of the Old Ones and their magical prowess. So, using these clues, it would appear that the Old Ones are simply a much more powerful version of the Slann themselves. That their magical abilities, at least initially, came from a psychic energy source, separate to the normal chaos energy source. Essentially a think it and it will be source. I like tomato sauce, just in case anybody was wondering. So let's look at what the Old Ones did with these aforementioned psychic abilities. Well, they reformed the planet, recreating it to make it fit for habitation for the different intelligent life forms that they would go on to create. When the Old Ones arrived, the Warhammer planet was basically a big ball of ice, populated by dragons and dragon ogres, see previous videos. Using their innate magical psychic abilities, they warmed up the planet, moving it closer to the sun. That takes some power. They reformed the continents into the shapes that they are in currently. And they even created new land masses, bringing them out of the ocean, such as the island that would come to be known as Ulthuan, the future homeland of the Elves. They then went on to create those races, the lizard men, the elves, humans, dwarfs, etc. It's interesting that we can see examples of this psychic energy, to a much less powerful extent, in the actions of the Slann themselves. A long time after the passing of the Old Ones, and around 1500 years before the coming of Sigmar, the Slann Lord Quex, with the help of other Slann mage priests, is able to slightly shift an entire continent in accord with what they believe were the Old Ones' wishes before their demise. Unfortunately, the shift occurs along the World's Edge Mountains, which are the homeland of the Dwarven Empire, causing massive earthquakes to destroy many of the Dwarven mountain holds. An event that would come to be known by the dwarves as the Time of Woe. The dwarves believing it to be a natural disaster, they never actually find out that the Slann are the cause of it. This event provides a good example of the immense power of the psychic energy that the Old Ones possessed in comparison to the current day. The Slann are the most powerful mages in the Warhammer lore, and it took several of them all their skill and power to slightly move the landmass. The Old Ones were each capable on their own to move continents around at their leisure. You know, we want continent over there, we'll stick it over there. Maybe have one in the corner, it'll look nice. They could even move the planet. So they could move the planet closer to the sun. That's pretty powerful. Now, this is where things get interesting, as up until now, things have been pretty vague in talking about the Old Ones and their psychic magic, as we simply have very little information about it. Wait! News just in, hold the phone. By the way, my voice is knackered. The whole time that I have been making this video, there has been something about the Slann and their magical ways that I knew I was forgetting. Some obscure reference to the nature of their abilities in one of the many fantasy novels that I own. This has been annoyingly niggling at my little brain for ages, but
Success. I have literally just remembered the novel I had read this in, and just in time, as at this point I had finished editing and was just about to put this video on YouTube. Instead, oh my god, have you heard my voice? It's knackered. Instead, check this out. I'm just going to first read the passage, literally word for word, and then we can discuss it a little bit after. Okay, so this novel is called Temple of the Serpent, and it's by C.L. Werner. It's part of a series called Thanquol and Bone Ripper novels, which is actually a spin-off series from the legendary Gotrek and Felix novels, Thanquol being a comical, skaven bad guy, and in many ways an anti-hero that pops up regularly in the lives of Gotrek and Felix. He's awesome, so he got his own series. You can never get enough Gracer Thanquol. However, you can certainly get enough of my voice. I sound like I've been smoking 50 cigarettes a day. My apologies. Anyway, this passage I'm about to read appears at the very end of the book, so spoilers if you haven't read it and you want to read it. I'll turn off the spoilers sign when I've finished talking about this book. Now, let me just give you some very brief context. Thanquol has been sent to Lustria, the home of the Lizardmen, in order to assassinate the prophet of Sotek, Sotek being one of the Lizardmen gods. At the same time, a group of humans and an elf are travelling to Ulthuan in order to trade goods, but are shipwrecked on the way to, you guessed it, Lustria. They both parties end up in one of the ancient Lizardmen's cities, which is full of incredibly valuable treasures, and are trying to go on the rob whilst simultaneously escape Lustria, whilst being hunted down by endless Lizardmen. Not a good plan, not going to end well. So at this point, pretty much all the humans and the elf are dead. The main human character having actually taken his own life in front of the newly awakened Slan mage priest, Lord Tlaco. Thanquol, of course, has somehow survived the whole ordeal, and at this point is rowing away in a tiny little boat, having achieved pretty much nothing and completely empty-handed. Lord Tlaco is chilling on the beach, thinking over the recent events, and this is where we start. Upon the shore, Lord Tlaco watched as Gracer Thanquol began to row away from the burning wreck of the pirate ship. The Slan considered this cruel little creature plucking his thoughts from the matrix of the great math. How unlike the unknown quotient, that curious warm blood that had taken his own life when rescue was offered to him. This corrupted algorithm was utterly selfish, fully aware of his own decay and decline towards negation, and reaching out with every essence of his being to stave off that inevitable eventuality. It was a contrast, to be certain. The Xakota might have made an interesting specimen to compare with the human, had the warm blood allowed himself to be captured. Now, however, Lord Tlaco doubted if there was any especial value in acquiring the Ratman. The Xakota carried diseases that could harm the skinks and other minion breeds, and through their sickness even a Slan might fall ill and die. That would not aid its study of the great math if the mage priest were to perish in a plague. No, there was something more to the corrupted algorithm than even the threat of the disease. Lord Tlaco could sense a connection between the Ratman and one of those dread persistent fractals that had cast their shadow upon the harmonious equations of the old ones. To invite such a being into his laboratories would be to endanger all of the Slan's other research. The mere presence of an algorithm connected to the persistent fractals invited corruption. The Slan's spot shifted. A dozen of its temple guards started to wade into the waves, their axes clenched tightly in their jaws. They would overturn the boat and butcher the noxious creature, and end its menace to the great math. Abruptly, Lord Tlaco's eyes dilated, and a low croak rumbled from his wide mouth, arresting the advance of the lizardmen. The little skink minion perched upon the Slan's dais chirped and hissed, calling the warriors back. Casting his thoughts through the potentialities of the great math, Lord Tlaco tried to see the possibilities of this corrupted algorithm that had drawn his attention. The mage priest was pleased by the way the Sarkota's value ingratiated itself into other equations. If the Slan had been capable, he would have found the degeneration of those problems highly amusing. The Sarkota was a greater menace to his own kind than he was to the great math. Through him, much could be done to undermine the rest of his kind. The corrupted algorithm's selfishness, greed and ambition would lead him into conflict with others of his kind, conflict that would greatly weaken the Sarkota as a species. Yes, the potentialities of probability made it desirable that the Sarkota should return to his own kind. Focusing its consciousness upon the matrix of reality, Lord Tlaco exited the current of the sea, creating a new undersea stream that would speed the corrupted algorithm back across the world pond. The Slan would uncreate the environmental change his magic had caused once it had served its purpose. A shift of his skin spots told the skink attendant to remind the mage priest to do so before the next lunar cycle. Lord Tlaco remained with his retinue on the beach, watching the tiny dot of Thanquol's boat dwindling on the horizon. Only when the grey seer was completely lost to sight did the Slan give the command to return into the jungle. He expended some of his magic to weave a corridor through the trees, a pathway that would bring them quickly back to the pyramids of Zlanhuapek, the City of Mists. Now that the experiment was at an end, the mage priest was keen to study what results he had acquired. Their influence on the great math would be a thing worth contemplating over the next century. Okay, so this is pretty weird stuff to get your head around, but the way I see it is it's kind of like the film The Matrix. You know that scene at the end when Neo is revived from the dead and he sees the Matrix as it truly is, all computerized and made up of data that can be manipulated? Well, this is kind of the same. Basically, there is this thing called the Great Math, and that is how the world truly is. This is the way that the old ones understood the nature of the world, and they created the Slan as beings that could also look upon the world like this. So it's all information. Everything is made up of equations, and when a Slan looks upon the world, they see these equations. Even the people within the world are viewed as algorithms. The old ones' creations being algorithms that fit into the great math, and the bad guys like Skaven, orcs, beastmen, etc. being seen almost as viruses, bad algorithms that are screwing up this great math. Well, this is all pretty interesting, but what does it have to do with magic? Well, when the Slan, and in turn the old ones, perform their magic, what they are actually doing is manipulating the equations within the great math in order to create the desired effect. And to the rest of the beings on the planet, who don't see the world in equations, it appears as magic. So, when Lord Tlaco moves the trees in order to reach the City of Mists, to him, he is manipulating the equations in an almost scientific way, like a program on a computer, so that the trees move to another spot. To the rest of the world, the trees are magically moving. So that's pretty cool, actually. It means that all the feats of the Old Ones and Slan, such as freaking moving the planet, were probably their manipulation of the great math. To them, computer programming. To us, magic. So there we go. A little extra information for you. Now, on with the video I had already made. So you may notice that my voice is suddenly healed. It may look like magic, but it's just a computer program. However, one thing that is absolutely clear is that during the Old Ones' meddling, they opened up a hole in the fabric of reality that led straight to the realm of chaos. The place that I have already talked about pretty extensively in other videos. And one day, we might just make it out of there. Now, the important thing for this video is that the energy leaking out of the realm of chaos and into the physical world is what makes up what is typically regarded as magic in Warhammer. So the main focus of this video is going to be on this type of magic, although I will touch upon other kinds of magic later on as well. Okay, so let's just get this straight. The Old Ones create these polar gates at the north and south pole of the world, basically for convenient travelling purposes. You know, we don't want to have to wait around in queues or anything. And what does it result in? 2 collapsed gates that are now portals to the realm of chaos, a demon-infested crazy land. And then they disappear. Or possibly die, we don't know. So, well done, Old Ones. Give them a round of applause. So now demons can enter the world, but what do demons need to materialise in the world? They need chaos energy. And what is magic? It's the use of chaos energy, manipulating chaos energy to a particular end, normally with the use of spells. So, in reality, all the magic, whether good or evil, is made up of chaos energy and comes from the realm of chaos. Let's have a look at this chaos energy in some more detail. When we talk about this magic and how it manifests itself, we talk about it in terms of winds. Now, the way in which these winds work differ slightly in different interpretations, but I shall endeavour to create a clear and concise description of these winds of magic and how they relate to the many different races of the Warhammer world. It shouldn't be a problem. I am, after all, British. But firstly, why winds of magic? Well, it's simple. Because the chaos energy flows out of the realm of chaos and into the physical Warhammer world, much like a wind flowing, feeling to those individuals that are magically inclined, like winds blowing across the world, running through your hair, slipping through your fingertips. I think you get the idea. So what patterns do these winds take as they flow across the Warhammer world? And how do they interact with the many different kinds of magic users that populate the world? Having just left the realm of chaos, unchanged and unmanipulated, the chaos energy flows as one incredibly powerful wind, known as the pure wind of magic. Its arcane name being Dar, D-A-R.
Being the stuff of chaos in its purest form, its nature is that of what the realm of chaos represents. Dark and evil in nature, and very offensive in its capabilities. The many spells powered by the Wind of Dar are, as an overview, known as the Law of Dark Magic. Later, this Dar wind splits off into 8 separate smaller winds, each wind pertaining to a particular law that is defined from its particular theme, and is each made up of particular sets of spells that fall under that theme. Whew. This may at first sound very confusing, because it is, but I promise you, as we sink our teeth into these 8 winds and what they are made up of, things will become clearer. Please believe me, I do promise you. So, let's sink our teeth into these 8 winds, taking them one at a time and exploring their themes, powers, and the spells associated with them. To aid in remembering the differences between each of these winds, they are also each given their own colour to represent them. Isn't that nice? By the way, when I say winds all the time, anyone else keep thinking of farts? Just curious. It's also important to understand how each wind works in practice. Luckily, there is a simple way of doing this, and that is by walking in the shoes of a wizard of the Empire. The reason I'm going to take an Empire wizard as our case study is because a wizard of the Empire is only capable of learning spells that derive from one wind of magic. It could be any wind, depending on the wizard, but they have to stick to that one. In fact, you will find that in the Empire, there is a separate college for each wind of magic, where wizards go to study that particular law. But we'll explore all of that later on. Other races manipulate the winds in a multitude of ways, which again we will get into later. But for now, this is definitely the easiest way to explore each of these winds. So before we start, we need a wizard. Well, really, we need 8 wizards, one for each wind. But I'm not going to come up with 8 different names of wizards. This video is definitely late enough. So all our wizards are going to have the same name. Just remember though, I stress an Empire wizard can only learn from one wind of magic. So despite the same name, they are all technically different wizards. So, I need a name. I know. I owe a very important shout out to a particular viewer who's been waiting a while, who commented on one of my videos. I asked a question about the Warhammer novels, and Andrew Fulton got the correct answer first. So, we shall call all our Empire wizards the 8 Andrew Fulton octuplets. So just to sum up, we shall look at an overview of each wind of magic, and then the great Empire mage, Andrew Fulton, will show us how they work in practice. Okay, so wind number 1 is called Hysh, Hysh, and it powers the law of light. This wind blows wherever light can be found in the Warhammer world, and it therefore relies heavily on the sun. The best time to cast spells is therefore during the day. However, a particularly skilled mage of Hysh can actually draw power from items that have been in the light and absorbed the light, even when it's dark. I wouldn't go visit the dwarves, Andrew. Your magic would be useless in the deep earth of the mountain holds. The Warhammer Wiki describes Hysh as follows. Hysh is the magic of illumination, the abstract of high-mindedness and consciousness in its most general sense. It is intangible, diffused and all-permeating, needing the total focus of will and an absolute determination of mind to make use of it. It is perhaps the most difficult of the colours to bend to one's will. Now in practice, the law of light excels in two particular areas. Firstly, it is great for banishing and destroying the unnatural, so things like demons and the undead. Secondly, some spells are great for aiding your allies, giving them particular boons to give your side the edge in the fight. So here's the scenario. Word has come that a vampire is on the loose. In the dark of night, small villages are being found, void of all people, blood splattered everywhere. Word comes to Altdorf of these dark tidings, and so a small force of Altdorf's finest is sent to sort out the problem. The small force of halberdiers and Reiksguard knights are accompanied by the great wizard Andrew Fulton, master of the law of light. As they arrive at the scene, it becomes clear what has happened to the villagers, as hundreds of zombies are blocking the road. The vampire must be close, but these zombies need to be dealt with. These once villagers need to find peace in the embrace of more. It is the duty, therefore, of the Empire's finest to destroy every last one of them. The halberdiers line up and prepare to take the shambling charge of the zombies. The knights hold back, waiting for the right moment to charge. Right, Andrew, you're up. You make some space for yourself so that you can start casting spells. So, let's see what you can do. Well, as the zombies charge, you use the spell Shem's Burning Gaze. Bolts of cleansing energy fly from your fingertips, searing zombie after zombie. Just before the zombies reach the line of halberdiers, you cast Far's Protection. You call upon the Guardians of Light to protect your allies from harm. It is now much harder for the zombies to land those killing blows on your fellow countrymen. Oh no, the right flank is starting to buckle, but you have things under control. You cast the Speed of Light on the flagging unit, drawing forth enabling energies to steady faint hearts. With newfound courage, the right flank fights its way back into position. Hang on a second, what's that in the distance? It's a unit of skeletons, and they're heading straight for the Reiksguard Knights that haven't even spotted them. You try to shout a warning, but your voice is drowned out by the clamour of the battle. Your only option left is to cast Net of Amintok. It's successful, and a net of pure light engulfs the skeletons, trapping them in place. The knights, having seen the brightly glowing net, form up and prepare to charge the trapped skeletons. The commander turns his head your way and gives a nod of thanks before the knights charge. The thundering hooves shake the ground, and the entrapped skeletons, standing no chance, are trampled into dust. there are very few zombies left now. The halberdiers are pushing further and further forward, and the knights, having dealt with one foe, turn about and prepare to charge their flank and finish them off. They strike like a battering ram, the charge at full speed, decimating the few zombies left. All except one. You notice at the last second before impact, one knight, a courageous fellow by the name of JKC. Yes, I know, very strange name for an Empire Knight, but I did say I would give a shout out to you two, so there you go. Anyway, what's he doing? Oh no, what in the name of Sigmar is he doing? It's the vampire, come out of hiding, and JKC is heading right for him. You can feel the dark magic oozing from this Sigmar-forsaken creature. One Reichsguard knight surely doesn't stand a chance. You need your help, Andrew. You fire Banishment, a magical missile of purest light that can destroy anything tainted by darkness. A bolt of pure light energy speeds towards the vampire. It's on target. It's going to hit. At the last second, the vampire raises his hand and somehow deflects the blast using his own dark magics. There's nothing more you can do. JKC is as good as dead. Wait, there is one more spell, but do you have time? JKC is bearing down upon the wretched thing. As fast as you can, you cast Byronk's, bloody hell these names, Byronk's Time Warp. Light magic streams towards the two combatants, and just before they clash, strikes down upon JKC, infusing him with light magic and freeing him from the passage of time, speeding his actions. Under normal circumstances, a vampire is far faster than a human. This is not normal circumstances. The spell grants JKC with superhuman speed, and faster than the eye can see, JKC plunges his sword straight through the heart of this nameless vampiric terror. Phew! Andrew wipes the sweat from his face, turning to see the last few zombies fall to the ground. With the vampire dead, the magic that animated them has left, and the dead can once again rest in peace. And by the way, we will get to vampire magic later on as well. So, there we have the Wind of Isre, light magic. Next up, we have Shaman, Michael Jackson, Shaman, the yellow wind that infuses the law of metal with its power. Right, we'll do this one as another fanfiction, and then we can breeze through the other 6. Let's do it! Calm down, Shades. Next up, we have the Wind of Shaman, which is associated with the law of metal. So any metal such as copper, tin, iron, or even gold and silver gives power to the wind and tend to be necessary in producing the spells within the law. Due to the wind being attracted to physical objects within the world, it tends to be one of the easier winds to get to grips with for any aspiring wizard. So you know what that means? Andrew Fulton, it's time for you to get to grips with it. The Empire, as per usual, is at war. This time, it's once again their troublesome neighbours, Bretonnia. Knights errant, eager to earn respect and position, have gathered together, and several large companies are marching through Axbite Pass, thinking that they can smash through whatever resistance they come across and find easy access into the Reichland. They have assembled quickly, thinking to catch the Reichland army unprepared. What they failed to understand, however, was the loyalty of the dwarves, who consider loyalty and honour as some of the most important characteristics a man or dwarf should possess. Axebite Pass is a mountain pass. It cuts through the Grey Mountains, and where there are mountains, there are dwarfs to be found. These particular dwarfs are known as Grey Dwarfs, and like their World's Edge Mountain cousins, they are strong allies of the Empire. Grey Dwarf Rangers spot the approaching knights, and with surprising speed send word to Reichland. As the Knights Errant, commanded by a small unit of Knights of the Realm, reach the end of the pass, they are met by a large host of the finest soldiers Reichland has to offer, combined with a dwarven host of stout warriors and rangers, and more importantly, dwarven black powder weapons, which all know are the finest in the world. Man and dwarf stand proudly together, friends in arms, all except one. One man of the Empire seems to be making the dwarves feel a little bit uncomfortable. That man would be Andrew Fulton, Master Wizard of the Gold Order, which gains its power from the Wind of Shaman. You see, dwarves don't like magic. Horrible elven stuff, they whisper. The world would be best off rid of it. But even a dwarf must admit that a wizard is a good asset to have on your side when battle commences, so they chew their beards and put up with it. Plutonian Knights are no cowards. As they see the force that stands in their way, they line up in perfect formation, all on horseback and all in glittering full-plate armour, for there are no finer knights in the world. The Reichland spear and swordsmen, along with the dwarven warriors, form a shield wall. The archers and dwarven rangers and crossbowmen stand behind the wall, jesting to each other at which kind of bow will shoot the farthest and be the most accurate. The Knights of the Empire place themselves behind the shield wall on the right and left flank, their horses and armour almost looking as impressive as the Plutonians. Seeing that all the knights of the enemy are on horses and therefore unable to climb, Andrew situates himself on a cliff edge at the right-hand side of the army, where a small scrap of land still clings to the mountains. Here you will have a perfect view of the battle and a perfect platform to perform your magic spells from the Law of Metal. For a few short moments there is quiet. Then, as if by some unknown signal, the game is on. The Plutonian Knights charge towards the Empire lines. The Plutonian Horses are known for being the largest and most powerful in the world. They are built like tanks, and as they come bearing down on the Empire lines, the very ground itself shakes to their thundering hooves. Most men, when standing in the way of a Plutonian horse at full gallop, would have turned tail and fled, never mind a full company at full gallop. But these are no ordinary men. These are some of the best trained foot soldiers in the Empire, and therefore the world. They have prepared for this, and they know that a horse will not gallop straight onto a halberdier or spear point. They are not suicidal beasts, so the men stand their ground and ready their weapons. And as for the dwarves, do you even need to ask? A dwarf flees from nothing. The shields are locked and the weapons are out. The Plutonians are closing the distance. It's at this point that Master Wizard Andrew Fulton decides to make his first move. Summoning the Wind of Shaman to his side, he casts Searing Drum. From fingertips spring forth a multitude of silver slivers at incredible speed. A wave of the silver strikes the heart of the Plutonian line. Men and horses drop to the floor, either wounded or dead. But being such expert knights, the line holds steady and the Plutonian charge moves ever closer. As Andrew readies himself for another go, there is a huge blast of noise. It's the dwarven cannon and mortar. Plutonian troops continue to drop, and if I'm not mistaken, I could have sworn that the Plutonian line wavered before continuing the charge. It's only for a second, but it's just enough time for Andrew to get off another spell. Standing tall, arms outstretched to the heavens, he brings forth the spell Plague of Rust. 1 second. 2 seconds. It would appear that nothing has happened. Oh wait, hang on, what's this? Under normal circumstances, Plutonian Knights are covered head to foot in very well made and effective plate armour. Breastplates, greaves, all that jazz. This armour tends to be covered in sigils and polished by squires before battle to a glimmering sheen. However, as the new spell begins to take effect, something strange happens. Browny red patches begin to appear all over the armour, and not just on 1 or 2 knights, but a large portion of the force. Doesn't sound like much of a spell, but as the two armies are about to come together, these patches start to grow. What are they? It's rust, as if you hadn't guessed. The knight's armour is rotting and rusting away. Pieces of metal are flying everywhere. Confusion spreads throughout the ranks, and the charge starts to lose momentum. It's at this point that the two armies clash. Well, I should say almost clash. As I said before, horses don't tend to be, by nature, suicidal, and they are more intelligent animals than many people think. So, as the armies are about to close, all they see in front of them is a mass of very sharp and very pointed objects. Since the shield wall is held, unfortunately for the Plutonians, at the very last moment before impact, the horses, and therefore the knights, turn 90 degrees and gallop away from the shield wall. It's the moment Andrew Fulton, the Reichland archers, and the dwarven crossbowmen have been waiting for. As the Plutonians turn away from the army, Andrew casts Enchanted Blades of Adan and sends powerful magic coursing over the archers and crossbowmen's weapons. The result is that the weapons are now infinitely stronger, more powerful, sharper, and deadlier than before. The enchanted arrows and quarrels now easily pierce the rusty armour, and the Plutonian force, for the first time, takes very heavy casualties. The weapons have been improved, might as well improve the allied soldiers that are using them. So, as the Plutonians turn about to have another crack at it, Andrew casts Glittering Robe. Raising his hands, he flings them about in intricate patterns, and a sigil of power appears in the air. Suddenly, a cloak of shimmering scales appears around the Reichland soldiers, taking the men by surprise, but welcomed for its protection. Andrew knows better than placing the spell on the dwarves. They really don't approve of that sort of thing. Besides, as a dwarf says, we don't need the help of such elfy stuff to crack a few manling skulls. The Plutonian Knights charge again, and this time perhaps thinking that their new armour of shimmering scales will totally protect them, the right-wing soldiers fail to organise themselves properly, and this charge hits the Allied line, punching through several ranks before becoming entrenched into a vicious melee. The Dwarves' line, however, holds firm, and once again the Knights on that side turn about at the last moment and fall back. Seeing that the other side of the battle has easier pickings, they prepare to charge that section of the battle line. Andrew, seeing that the Reichlanders may not be able to take another charge, decides his only option is to try and outflank them. This calls for a wonderful little spell called Gehenna's Golden Hounds. So taking a glimmering golden whistle out of his robes, he takes a deep breath and blows on it, summoning a massive pair of clockwork hounds, which sneak up behind the Plutonian lines and charge their rear. Unaware of the dogs, the Plutonians at the rear are massacred and their charge fails, throwing confusion through the ranks. Right, that's most of the enemy army dealt with for the time being. The only trouble at the moment is the small force that has penetrated the Allied line. The threat is real, however, as this unit is mostly made up of the more experienced and therefore more deadly Knights of the Realm, rather than the bulk of the force made up of the Knights Errant. What can we do? What can we do? It's times like this that call for a bit of a sneaky spell. Transmutation of Lead. As Andrew gestures at his foes, their weapons become much heavier and more cumbersome, twice the burden that they were but moments before. This slowdown in pace is just what the Reichlanders and the Dwarves need to push back the Knights, gather themselves, and reform their formation. Seeing the Allied army's battle lines as strong as ever, and that pesky wizard that's caused so much trouble showing no signs of tiring, the Knights of Bretonnia decide that the lady is not with them on this day, and sorrowfully they sound the retreat. Later that day, as the sun begins to go down and the victory celebrations are in full swing, Andrew decides that the men and dwarves deserve a treat. Getting the troops to gather round, Andrew Fulton, Master Wizard of Shamon, unleashes a hail of magical energy, and as the men and dwarves look on in wonder, he transmutates all of the fallen Bretonnian weapons and armour into shimmering solid gold. Now that is one spell even a dwarf can appreciate. Phew. Okay, perhaps that's enough looking at the spells in practice. I'm sure you've had your fill of fanfiction, and I think you get the idea. Plus, if I carry on like this for all 8 Winds of Magic, then this video will be about 4 hours long, and nobody wants that. So I'll just give you some information on what the other Winds of Magic involve, and I'm sure you can imagine how they are put into practice from the extensive examples I've already given. So, next up we have the Wind of Garam, which contains within it the Law of Life. And for this law, I have to put on my soothing voice. This wind is green in colour, and everything about it says nature. A stream flowing through a wood gives Garam its power. Mighty oak trees surrounded by growing saplings and summer flowers gives Garan its power. Even the act of the rain falling itself is known as the Torrent of Garan. You get the idea, it's the hippie wind. Therefore, in the summer, the wind blows strongest, and in the winter, its power is at its low. The spells associated with Garan tend to focus on revitalizing and healing, and so it's a great defensive law to aid allies in war. It can also, however, be used offensively, in the sense that certain spells manipulate nature to basically attack on the wizard's behalf. So let's run through the spells involved with the Law of Life. First up, we have Earthblood. Tapping into the winds of magic, the wizard creates a charm of rebirth that bestows great resilience upon himself and his companions. Number 2, we have Awakening of the Wood. Trees have long and wrathful memories, needing only a little magical encouragement to lash out with root and branch. Number 3 is called Flesh to Stone. The wizard transmutes his allies' mortal form to unyielding rock. Number 4 is Throne of Vines. The wizard fashions for himself a walking throne of vine and bracken to renew and strengthen his connection with the living world. Number 5, Shield of Thorns. At the wizard's command, crawling brambles burst forth from the ground, forming a living barrier around his allies. Number 6 is called Regrowth. Invoking the name of Dunthandor, Lord of the Ancient Wild Shrines, the wizard infuses his fallen friends with fresh life, closing wounds and healing broken bones with supernatural speed. Finally, we have number 7, the Dwellers Below. Gnarled creatures emerge from the ground, their steely strong fingers tearing at the foe's flesh, clutching their limbs and dragging them down to who knows what fate. Leaving the earthly realm behind, let's try reaching for the stars. The things I do with words. Up next, we have the Wind of Isre, which is blue in colour and contains within it the law of the heavens. Its power is sourced from both starlight and moonlight. Thus, whilst during the night there is plenty of it, it is elusive to grasp, emanating so high in the atmosphere. The spells associated with the Wind of Isre are considered to be some of the most creative of the 8 winds, being more heavily driven from the emotions of the caster. More specifically, the type of emotion that comes from gazing up at the night sky, be it in wonder at the epic scale of the cosmos, the complexity of the universe, or the sheer aesthetic beauty of a star. The particular skills that the Wind of Isre grants are the study of dreams and their meaning, the art of divination, and the study of the world with a more scientific methodology. And now, once more, let's run through some particular spells within the Law of Heavens. First up, we have Ice Shard Blizzard. Razor-sharp shards of ice hurl from the chill skies to blind and dishearten the foe. Next, Harmonic Convergence. Divining auspicious signs, the caster guides the minds of his fellow warriors. Interesting. And next there is Wind Blast. The wizard seizes the winds of the battlefield, directing them against the foe. And then we have Curse of the Midnight Wind. Only 3 words of this ancient tongue are known in modern days. 3 words to unleash a curse that was old when the world was young. That sounds pretty cool. And we have now Uranon's Thunderbolt. With a crack of thunder, the wizard calls down an almighty ball of lightning and hurls it at the enemy. Penultimately, we have Comet of Cassandra. Reaching out across the winds of magic into the highest heavens, the wizard draws a wandering meteorite down towards the battlefield. And finally, we have Chain Lightning. Lightning bursts from the wizard's hands and arcs across the battlefield, leaping from foe to foe with crackling fury. So, those are the Law of Heavens. Sounds pretty cool to me. Let's change the tone and get a little mysterious for a while with our next Wind of Magic, Ulgu and the Law of Shadow, also known as the Grey Wind. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this one out. Grey, shadow, it's this wind that's the classic fantasy magic associated with the spy or the assassin. This is where it comes from. The magic is designed to do things like confuse or disorientate, or perhaps to aid in the art of hiding in plain sight. Calling it the ninja wind would also do it justice. The source of this wind's power is the low-lying ground and waterways, anywhere with an abundance of shadow or where thick mists gather. To speak the law of shadow is to sound heavy and all-encompassing. To feel it is to feel something you can't quite describe, something that just seems to elude you. So, before the spells of the law of shadow elude me, I'd best run through a few of them. Ho ho ho! Okay, number 1 is Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma. The wizard creates a numbing fog that causes his foolish foe to listlessly stagger and stumble. Number 2, Steed of Shadows. A coal-black, insubstantial drake materialises to carry a hero away on wings of night. Number 3, the enfeebling foe. Deceived by the grey wizard's wiles, the enemy's burdens lie impossibly heavy upon their shoulders. Number 4, the Withering. The wizard reaches into the minds of the foe, instigating nebulous images of weakness and doubt. Number 5, the Penumbral Pendulum. A ghostly razor-edged pendulum materialises in the air above the wizard. On his single word of command, the pendulum swings towards the enemy, picking up speed as it does so. Is the pendulum real enough to kill, or is it just a conjurer's trick? Only a fool would stand in its path to find out. Number 6, Pit of Shades. The wizard opens a vortex to the infamous Pit of Shades. Terrified warriors fall screaming through the portal, plummeting to a dimension filled with shadow and the incessant wailing of those who dwell beyond. And number 7, we have Occam's Mind Razor. The wizard summons phantasmal weapons for his allies that shred the folds of consciousness and reason. Victims of these Mind Razor believe themselves slain, and so they die. On to the 6th of the 8 winds. We're really burning through these now. After the Law of Shadow, how can we continue to bring down the mood? I know, perhaps with Shyish, the Wind of Death. The Wind of Shyish, which contains within it the Law of Death, is purple in colour and in my opinion is the wind that represents the core essence of what the Warhammer fantasy lore is, in both its look and manner. What I mean by this is that if you had to describe to someone the world of Warhammer fantasy, it would be heroic, yet ultimately futile, the struggle to survive in an ever war-torn world. A world with a gothic horror aesthetic, carved out of stone and covered in skulls. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, I'm going to read out what the Warhammer Wiki has to say about Shyish. See if it sounds familiar. The power of Shyish comes from the ending of things, the slow decline of the soul, and the certainty and terrible awe of death that all sentient creatures must face. Shyish tells us that even though physical form must inevitably come to an end, creation is permanent. Shyish is drawn to places where death must be faced, or where things are brought to an end. It blows strongly around battlefields, lingers around gallows and courts of justice, and hangs in the mournful silence around fresh graves. It is said to be strongest around times of obvious transition, when one state ends and another begins. Dawn and dusk are the most obvious examples of this, but also spring and autumn, and the equinoxes that mark the beginning of the end for winter and summer. See what I mean? To me, that is the essence of Warhammer Fantasy, in a skull-covered little package. Now, to just run through some spells before we all shuffle off our mortal coil. Firstly, we have Spirit Leech. The wizard extends an ebon hand towards the chosen foe, leeching its spirit through tainted sorcery. Secondly, Aspect of the Dread Knight. An invisible aura of horror surrounds the wizard's allies. Only the bravest foe will now stand before them. Thirdly, we have the Caress of Lanith. Lanith was an Arabian sorcerer whose ardent passions were eclipsed only by her capriciousness. It takes little effort to call her back from the spirit world to caress a new lover of the caster's choosing. I kinda like that spell. Soul Blight. Harnessing the sickly power of Shyish, the wizard weakens his foe's will to survive the battle. Fifthly, we have the Doom and Darkness. Spirits of the departed assail the caster's foes, sapping their resolve. Sixthly, we have the Fate of Bjuna. Bjuna was a mighty warrior, so the story goes, but famously never smiled. Leastways, not until the trickster god cursed him to laugh until his sides ruptured and split. Tellers of this tale cannot agree whose fate was worse, Bjuna's or the servants who had to clean up the mess. And finally, we have the Purple Son of Xerius. A colossal orb of purple-edged darkness materializes upon the battlefield. Those who do not escape its touch are turned to inert and unfeeling crystal. That was the law of death. Fear it, fear it, fear it. If the law of death most represents a Warhammer wizard, then our penultimate wind, I'm going to say Axsky, but I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right. The Wind of Fire most represents the witches and wizards of stereotypical fantasy. Let's check it out. The wind is naturally fire-red in colour, and to those individuals magically inclined, it is said to feel hot, burning the skin and sucking all the moisture from the air. The wind gathers around fire, be that natural or man-made, from something as simple as a cooking fire in the local camp to the searing majesty of a natural volcano. Like a moth to a flame, the wind is also drawn to those of a fiery temperament. So we are talking about extreme feelings of emotion, from excitement to argument, courage and vehemence. The bright wizards who wield Axgai tend to work as battlefield mages, as the spells by nature are very offensive and thus suited to a warlike role. The spells contained within the lore of fire are as follows. First up is Fireball, naturally. The wizard conjures a roiling ball of magical flame and hurls it at a nearby foe. Second, we have Cascading Fire Cloak. A shield of flame appears around the wizard, scorching nearby foes. Thirdly, Flaming Sword of Ruin. The wizard ensorcels his allies' weapons, making them burn with a savagely hungry flame. Number 4 is the Burning Head. A cackling visage, wreathed in flame, appears before the wizard. With a final screech of glee, it bounds towards the enemy. Number 5, Piercing Bolts of Burning. Focusing all his mystical might, the wizard strikes his foe with a flurry of incandescent missiles. Number 6 is Fulminating Flame Cage. Searing rods of magical flame shoot from the wizard's outstretched hands, trammeling his chosen foe in a fiery prison. And finally, we have Flame Storm. A column of roiling flame bursts from the battlefield, the roar of its creation almost drowning out the screams of its victims. Burn, baby, burn. And our final wind, number 8 of the 8 winds of magic, is called, drumroll please, Gur, the Amber Wind. Before the Empire was formed and the colleges of magic were established, there were people with magical abilities that didn't have the official training of the colleges. These people were referred to as shamans, and their magic was associated with the wild and very closely associated with nature. Well, the mages of the present day that are the most similar to those shamans would be the Amber Wizards that use the Gur Wind. How so? Well, firstly, they don't have a college in the city. They live in the wild, in caves, much like the shamans, and live cut off from civilization. And secondly, their magic totally revolves around the wild. The Wind of Gur is bestial in nature, the joining of the predator and the prey. It gathers in wild places, away from the cities, places like the forests, mountains, lakes and rivers. To the average fellow, it seems savage in nature, but there is no malice in the wind. Because of this, most people, misguidedly, do not trust the Amber Wizards. Yet the law of beasts is a powerful one, and a great ally in the fight against chaos. For the final time, let's check out some spells. So, number 1, Wissan's Wild Form. The wizard unleashes the beast within, shaping its fury to transform his allies into a bestial form. Number 2, the Flock of Doom. With a mighty bellow, the wizard invokes Corvus the Crow Lord, summoning his servants to peck at the foe's eyes. Number 3, Pan's Impenetrable Pelt. Calling upon the beast spirits of the wild, the wizard sheathes his vulnerable flesh in unyielding fur and hide. Number 4, the Amber Spear. Sounding a gnarled horn, the wizard summons a glowing amber spear. Seizing hard upon the spear's translucent shaft, he hurls it at the foe with uncanny accuracy. Number 5, the Curse of Anthro. At the wizard's command, nebulous nature spirits assail the foe, clawing at them with hands not nearly as insubstantial as they appear. Number 6, the Savage Beast of Horus. The beast within is a formidable thing, if unleashed to its full potential. And our final spell of all 8 winds of magic, Transformation of Kadon. Kadon was a master of forms, able to shift his shape to that of any monster. One day, he found that he could not change back.
Back to the crappy voice, I'm afraid. They are the 8 winds of magic that are the standard basis for the typical magic in Warhammer Fantasy. But we aren't finished yet. Initially, we had the raw stuff of chaos that blows out of the realm of chaos. In its pure form, the chaos wind is known as dark magic or pure magic, or to use the arcane name, Dar. It then splits into the 8 winds that we've just looked at, with human wizards and many other types of wizards using one of the winds to work their spells. Well, what if you're not human? What if you're from a race with incredible magical ability? Enter here, obviously, the Slan that we talked about at the start, but also my favourite creatures in Warhammer, the Elves. In particular, the High Elves. They're the best elves. Well, if you are a Slan or a High Elf and have studied magic long enough, you can actually take those 8 separate winds of magic and put them all back together again for your own purposes. Naturally, you would think that the magic would then return to its old state of Dar, but you would be wrong. When the Slan or the High Elves put those 8 winds back together, they create a new wind of magic, an immensely powerful wind, far stronger than any of the 8 winds alone. When put together, they create the wind of Quaish, known more commonly as high magic. I wish it had the power to sort my throat out. So, just to make it clear how freaking cool high magic is, let's take a top level high elf mage. They can gather to them all 8 of the separate winds. A human and most other races mages have enough trouble spending a lifetime in mastering just one of these winds. This elf can take all 8 and weave them together, in doing so also transforming the resulting super wind into a force for good, and cast immensely powerful spells from this newly formed high wind. The lore involved with the wind of Quaish is simply called the Law of High Magic. Let's check out some of the spells involved. Right, I'll just give really quick little explanations. First up, we have Drain Magic, where the wizard conjures a vortex of anti-magic to calm the battlefield. Then there's Soul Quench. White light bursts forth, banishing the spirits of those it touches. Then there's Apotheosis. Waves of pure magic infuse the wizard's allies. We then have Hand of Glory. With a simple sign, the wizard grants his allies the might of old. Then there's Walk Between Worlds. For a moment, the wizard's allies tread immortal pathways. Next, there's Tempest. Without warning, an 8-winded storm breaks about the foe. Then, penultimately, we have arcane unforging, the magic of unmaking flies true from outstretched hands. And finally, there's fiery convocation. With a single secret word, fire rages and flesh burns. You can see there, a lot of the spells are aiding spells for allies, but there are also some pretty crazy destructive spells. So we kind of have a palindrome of magical winds. We have the 2 portals at each of the world's poles, portals to the realm of chaos that the old ones, in their stupidity and desperate need to avoid traffic, opened up. Out of these portals flows the chaos energy in the form of a wind. At first as Dar, the pure wind of chaos. The wind then separates, divides into 8 winds, with the majority of wizards using one particular wind to cast their spells. Finally, particularly adept wizards can reform those 8 separate winds into, once again, one solid wind. However, this time it has become Quaish, or high magic. And that, my friends, is the story of the winds of magic. I wonder how many times I said winds in this video. By the way, 10 points if anyone noticed the microphone picking up my brother's yawn just then. We've now pretty much covered your typical magic in Warhammer Fantasy. However, many different races have magical abilities that are unique to them. For example, the orcs and goblins have the concept of the big and little warg, where the importance of a large horde surrounding their shamans is crucial to their magical prowess. The vampire counts and tomb kings bring necromancy into the equation, which is a huge topic in itself. Seriously, when it comes to magic, if I was to talk about absolutely everything now, this video would be longer than Lord of the Rings. And while those films get away with it because they rock, I don't think that I necessarily would. So anything magical that is unique to a particular race, I will cover when we get to that race's videos. The warg stuff in the orcs and goblins videos, necromancy when we talk about vampires and other undead goodies. Before this video I was making videos on chaos, and bar Khorne, the other 3 main chaos gods, would you believe it, have their own magical laws. So those laws will probably be the first ones I get to. The laws of Tzeentch, Nurgle and Slaanesh. Likewise, when it comes to particularly important magic users, Nagash comes to mind and Kalador Dragon Tamer, we will get to them when we reach them in the story. I do have a plan. I think. I hope. For now, I think that's enough magical information for one day. Thank you so much for watching, and there is no way I am going to leave it this long again before I make a YouTube video. I'm going to make it as regular as I possibly can from now on, as I love making these videos, and I really want to build this channel up now into a great fantasy lore repository of information. Please rate, comment and subscribe, and I shall be seeing you very soon, hopefully with a better voice. Toodaloo.